Hello, thank you for listening to A Glimpse of the Kingdom. I'm Dr. David Pendergrass. Something that I encounter all the time when reading atheists or listening to them or meeting them is something that's going on psychologically. And before I say what that is, it just reminds me of something else that I've often heard in debates, particularly a guy named William Lane Craig, who's a Christian apologist. They ask him oftentimes, why do you think atheists not want to believe in God? Why do they not want to go in with the evidence and so forth? And he always says something along these lines: I don't want to do psychology, I just want to talk about the arguments. And that's interesting to me, and I hear his point, and I very much agree to a degree with his point that we shouldn't spend energy psychoanalyzing, especially if you're not trained in psychology. If you are trained in psychology or counseling, well, then it makes a lot more sense because they study that so much, and we have a pattern that we see when we counsel people all the time that we get pretty close at guesstimating exactly what's, at least on the surface, what's going on inside the person. Having said that, I understand you make it about the argument when you're talking about an argument. But I want to say, overall, though, I disagree with Dr. Craig on this one, not because for any other reason besides I just think that it's profoundly important to think about why a person believes what they believe. Now, I did a different podcast that you can find on A Glimpse of the Kingdom on iTunes. You can find it called Religious People Are So Close-Minded. And in that podcast, I talk about several of the things I've experienced in my life when it comes to religious people, how they can be very close-minded. And I encourage you to go back there and listen to that, because if by miracle you are a skeptic or an atheist and you're listening to this now, you're going to think he's being very unfair because Christian people are so close-minded too. Well, I concur that they can be, and I concur, and of course, hopefully you can concur that non-religious people can be. It seems to me that close-minded means when a person is not open to listening to any kind of argument or evidence because their mind is already made up. That's very different from saying, I've listened to all the arguments and evidence, and therefore I have made up my mind. For example, you might try to convince me 2 + 2 = 5. Well, I'm going to listen to you. But if I come to the conclusion that I don't think it's 5, I think it's 4, because I've made up my mind, it does not demonstrate I am close-minded. That's nonsense. Anyway, it's very important when we think about why a person believes what they believe, because it is not just a cerebral event. It is not. Intellectual assent is not just based on something being rational. It actually is emotional too. Now, any person who's worked at all in psychology will tell you that that's how all humans behave. I don't care what you believe. There's a degree to which your emotive self, your emotional self, plays a huge part in what it is we believe. Now, that the degree to which it influences, of course, is determined by the person's makeup. I'm very familiar with the personality indicator called Myers-Briggs, which has many detractors, I know, but I find it very helpful when dealing with personality types, and especially in relationships. And anyway, there's a particular kind of type in Myers-Briggs they call thinker type and feeler type. And this, in a general sense, this is about how a person processes information. Thinker types prefer to process information in impersonal, abstract ways. Feeler types tend to process information through personal interaction or personal memory. So where feeler types typically have a memory associated with a feeling, thinker types typically have a memory associated with a thought. And those are quite different. It has nothing to do with intellect, has nothing to do with aptitude. There are really, really, really smart feeler types, and there are really, really smart thinker types, and really dumb feeler types, and really dumb thinker types. So it's not about intelligence, it's about their ability, or the way they prefer to process information. I'm married to a strong feeler type. If there's a 0 to 10 scale, she's about a 9 or 10, and I'm about a 9 or 10 on the thinker scale. So I live this. I see it all the time. And my wife is very smart and has nothing to do with how she is intelligence. Okay, having said that, to thinker types, this is really important. This is really important what I'm about to say. And here I'm leading up to atheism and belief and so forth. To a thinker type, it is highly valued to be intelligent, to be smart. And so one of the greatest praises that you can give to a thinker type is you're smart, or you're intelligent, or brilliant, or genius. I mean, the better the superlative, the better it is. You're a genius. You're the smartest person I've ever met. You're the most intelligent person. And of course, intelligence is different from knowledge. If you said, you're the most knowledgeable person I've ever met, that's also a huge compliment to a thinker type. It's very, very important for them to be intelligent and be seen as that. It's very embarrassing to a thinker type to make intellectual mistakes. One of the worst insults you can tell a thinker type is you're stupid, you're irrational, you are merely being emotional, you haven't thought it through. These can be terrible cuss words to a thinker type because it can be very demeaning to them. So it's very important to a thinker type, especially those who, well, I'm trying to be kind here, who are not well adjusted in life. They don't have very good boundaries and very good people skills. This can be really devastating to them. It's very important to the average thinker type, especially those who don't have good coping skills, to never, ever, ever, ever be seen as duped or naive or ignorant or dumb or stupid or backwoods. That's a big deal. Feeler types, however, tend to really, really stay away from words like, or stay away from being accused of words like insensitive, mean, cold-hearted, distant, and so forth. So if you really want to hurt a feeler type's feelings, typically you call them those things. You call them, uncompassionate and cold-hearted and so forth. But it's a very different thing. You can say, well, they're really dumb. Well, it'll hurt their feelings too, but it's not the same as the other adjectives I gave. Okay, this matters because almost every atheist I've ever met and read, if I were a betting man, I would say they are a thinker type. I'm sure of all the millions of atheists and skeptics and agnostics in the world, there are feeler types out there. Of course. Oh my goodness. What I mean is people who are more rigorous atheists, people like Twitter, which they reach out to me all the time on Twitter, and the atheists do, and some are pretty funny, some aren't as funny as others, but of course they're always kind of as rude as possible, but but a lot of times I like it when they're funny, even if they're laughing at my expense. Sometimes it's kind of funny because I guess that's okay with me. But anyway, I noticed that these people care a whole lot about, of course, being rational. And that reminds me of the reasons why a person believes what they believe. And what I'm saying is, back to Dr. Craig's comment I said that with which I disagreed, and that is, it does matter why a person believes what they believe. Now, of course, to say it one more time before I move on and tell you some more reflections here, of course, it's not our job to psychoanalyze when you meet a person. If you do, you're just going to make what's called in logic the normal, very common fallacy called the ad hominem argument. To say, of course you don't believe in God, that's because you don't like men. Of course you don't like God, you're just a sexual deviant or something. In other words, we're attacking their character. Well, it's not that simple either. It's not. And so, now atheists don't mind at all saying, of course you believe in God, you're just scared of the dark. That's what Stephen Hawking says. Of course you believe in God, you've been brainwashed by your parents. Of course you believe in God, you're American and you're white and you're whatever. Of course you have no other option. If you were born 4,000 years ago, you'd have believed in Egyptian gods and so forth. It's only because of your upbringing. So those are classic ad hominem arguments. And that's it. And this also leans to the genetic fallacy, which is if I can tell you where your belief came from, I can demonstrate it to be false. Well, that's also, stupid, because if I believed that ibuprofen was good for my headaches, but I learned it from a comic book, well, that's a silly place to learn that ibuprofen is good for my headaches. But it absolutely is true. Ibuprofen is good for my headaches. So it doesn't matter where I learned the information. It doesn't mean it's false. It just might mean it's interesting I learned it from that spot. So just because my parents might have taught me Christianity doesn't mean it's false. It doesn't mean God doesn't exist. It just means that's why I learned it. So there's all kinds of fallacies like that, but I'm not going to talk about that right now. All I'm saying is I have encountered, so this is David's experience, I've encountered many different reasons personally. Now this is just personally. Well, I've encountered people who don't believe in God. And I've got I think I've got 5 or 6, 7 different reasons. And here's, I think here are a few reasons why someone would reject the belief in God or Christianity. Now, okay, so first of all, the one I've just said, and that was I'm leading up to this first big point, which is probably the most common reason I've encountered as a reason for atheism is the belief that believing in religion is for idiots, morons, intellectually enslaved. I mean, that's just how it is. Remember, because you're thinker types. And so it's a big, big, big deal. So in Richard Dawkins, Sam Harris, and all these people, when Daniel Dennett, the philosopher, said, let's call atheists the brights, the brights. Well, that means religious people are the dims, that is the dim-witted, the idiots. So this is not an argument based on anything. It's based on an emotional, psychological desire to be seen as smart. It's a really, really, really big deal to a thinker type. So the war that's raging is not just for arguments. It's for the perception that they're not an idiot. That's a big deal. And if you're a feeler type listening to this, you're like, I just don't understand it. But I'm telling you, this is true. And that's why they use words like irrational and nonsensical and stupid and all the time, is because them's fighting words. I mean, that's a big, big deal to be seen that way. So the number one reason I've seen is they're scared to death that believing in God will make them, or demonstrate that they are, brainwashed or worse, stupid. The peer pressure is overwhelming. So in order to feel valuable among all your quote-unquote smart friends, you simply must not believe in God. It's like they say, be free of the chains of faith, come forth and be set free, and the crowd cheers. Now, I've met some stupid Christians. I've also met stupid atheists, and I'm uncertain what this demonstrates. I don't know what that demonstrates. In any case, history of science, music, art, mathematics, history, education, theology, they make it abundantly clear that religious does not equal stupid or uninformed. I mean, nothing. I wonder what such influential Christians such as G.K. Chesterton or John Milton, Augustine and Thomas Aquinas, Rembrandt, Bach, Handel, Newton, Kepler would think about this widespread belief among atheists that the true intelligentsia, the real erudite, the true scholars are all materialist. This is nonsense. Nevertheless, there are atheists all over the world right now who refuse to believe in God because they're desperately afraid of being considered backwoods or duped or stupid or crazy like by their peers. Peter Atkins, who teaches, or he taught at Oxford, I don't know if he still teaches, he's a chemist, he goes so far as to suggest that persons who have abandoned their atheism for belief in God are all experiencing the early onset of senility. That is, they're going crazy. That's why they would start believing in God. Of course, brilliant scientists and philosophers are abandoning atheism all the time. And a list of former atheists would have to include the scientist and theologian Alister McGrath of Oxford, the esteemed geneticist Francis Collins, who helped map the human genome, C.S. Lewis, the great critic of medieval and Renaissance literature at Oxford, the philosopher of Yale and Boston University, J.N. Finlay, Antony Flew, the most well-known atheist philosopher of the previous century, left atheism and confessed a belief in an intelligent creator God. Again, you have to keep up the rhetoric in your mind to be an active atheist. Quote, religious people are all stupid and enslaved. I want to be free, so I must fight the urge. Stay free. Don't be like the masses. You're too smart for that. Don't forget, you're smarter than they are. You figured out something out that they just can't see. Stay firm. Feels good, right? You're part of an elite crowd now. You're in a crowd of about 5% of people on the planet. It feels good to be better than them all. All of those 6+ billion people on the planet are so stupid to believe in a higher power. You're too smart. Stay strong. There is no God. There is no God. There is no God. Maybe that's how the chant goes. So the psychological and emotional desire not to be seen as a moron is profound. Here's another reason atheists give for their atheism is that they were really hurt by people who claim to be religious. That's the second reason. They've been hurt by religious people. Now, I have profound empathy for people who have been hurt by religious people. John Loftus, who once claimed to be a Christian, he's written several books against Christianity, John Loftus. He left the faith because of the emotional pain he experienced, along with various unanswered questions he had. And this is exactly what, this is John Loftus, this is what he says, quote, "These are the three things that changed my thinking." That is to say, to leave Christianity. A major crisis, plus new information that caused me to see things differently, minus the sense of a loving, caring Christian community. Now, how intellectual does that sound? How cerebral and logical and Spock-like does that sound? He had a crisis, some new information, and he lost his friends, his caring Christian community. In other words, that's not intellectual at all. It's emotional. It's psychological. And that's good to use your emotions in psychology. So that's a good thing. It's very, very unfortunate he left the faith over that. All I'm saying is, this is where again, the reason why I disagree with William Lane Craig when he says, I don't want to talk about psychology. I think we should. These things matter a lot. Now, The most intense pain I've ever felt has come from the pain caused by Christians. It's true. Betrayal and evil actions are possible even from those who claim to be redeemed by Jesus. And for many atheists I've met, they refuse to be open to God's existence because it would involve, in their minds, opening wounds from which they are still healing. Now, however, the healthy response to trauma is grief, not rejecting your faith. Now, I understand the thought, quote, I'll never believe in a religion that produces that kind of person, that is, a person who would hurt me like that. Yet the truth claims of any religion stand or fall on the founder of the faith. Moses, Jesus, Muhammad, Mahavira, Kung Fu Tse. They found the founder, not the adherents. Not the adherents. Remember, we talked about this, I did at a different podcast. If every single scientist was a punk, if Einstein was the worst jerk, oh my goodness, Einstein beat babies just for fun. Does that mean E equals MC squared is false? Does that mean Einstein's scientific theories are false? Well, of course not. Not at all. But it means that you might not want to become a scientist if you met Einstein and he beat you up. You might say, forget him. And I understand that. Unfortunately, that's just not a good reason to reject Christianity because it's still true. But I understand that would be a reason to cause you to not be a Christian. So one would be, I can't be seen as a moron. That's a big one. Number two, because I've been hurt by religious people. And that's enough. I'm out of here. And that's very, very sad. And the third reason is that religion is seen as so primitive. That is, to believe in religion is to be backwards, regression, passé. Humans are about progress. And religion reminds us of our ignorance about the world. That is to say, it's so old. Why would you go back to a flat earth? And religion is like an old flat earth belief. Why would you do that? A fourth reason is because, and this has been studied by at least one psychologist, there was a breakdown of the atheist relationship with his or her father. It's staggering how frequent that is. Well-known atheists have delinquent or evil fathers. And before you dismiss it too quickly, you really ought to look it up. There's all kinds of studies been done on that demonstrate the father figure, at least through history. And that's not to say that all the time that's why. I'm only saying that is a common factor in many, many, many well-known atheists. A fifth reason is because perhaps atheists don't want to believe in someone that tells them what to do. In my opinion, this is the second most important reason why. That's hard. Maybe the top three kind of all tied. One would be, I don't want to be seen as stupid. The other one is Galatians hurt me. And the third one is this one, I don't want to be told what to do. When Christopher Hitchens was alive, he used to call God the divine dictator, the divine tyrant, or my favorite, a celestial North Korea. That's pretty funny. I don't believe in that kind of God either, so I agree with Christopher Hitchens. I would never believe in a celestial North Korea. See, it's a whole lot easier living a life with no moral consequences if you can ignore a moral lawgiver. I once worked with a woman who said she would never believe in Christianity because, as she said, quote, I could never believe in a religion that says I can't have sex unless I'm married. That's all it takes, right? And there's no arguments, no evidence, just sex. Tell me I can't have it, and I'll never follow that religion. And that's why this is such a common thing is I don't want to believe in religion because it means I'd have to change my lifestyle. I once had a student who had my whole class on apologetics, and at the very end of it, I said, I'm just curious. He always knew it didn't affect his grade. I'm curious, where are you now with your faith? He goes, no, you answered all my questions. But I still can't believe it right now because it means I have to change my lifestyle. And I said, okay. That's just the big reason. I don't want to change your lifestyle. A sixth reason, perhaps you've been an atheist for so long, or family or friends or with other atheists so long, that you just don't want to change. That is, believing in God or Christianity might mean you'd have to lose close family or friends, and they wouldn't understand why you're not the same anymore. It's a big decision. So while some people don't want to change because they want to keep doing the moral things they want, some people don't change because they don't want to lose their family and friends. And I understand that too. I really do. Maybe this last reason, number 7, perhaps atheists simply don't like the idea. Maybe rigorous autonomy, just wanting to live on your own, is appealing. As physicist and cosmologist Paul Davies says, there's no need to invoke anything supernatural in the origins of the universe or of life. I have never liked the idea of divine tinkering. For me, it is much more inspiring to believe that a set of mathematical laws can be so clever as to bring all these things into being. Now, besides fatal flaws in believing things like mathematical laws bring things into being that's just ridiculous. It's interesting that he says, I've never liked the idea. One wonders why divine causation is so repulsive to him. I guess I'll wrap up. I appreciate what Jay Budzkowski, I'm sorry, brother, if you ever one day hear this. He's a professor at the University at UT Austin, University of Texas, Austin. He got his PhD from Yale University. He abandoned all of his childhood belief in Christianity and God through all his formal education. He rejected not only God, but any form of objective morality. However, he eventually abandoned his rigorous atheism for Christianity. He believes that, quote, at the bottom of all atheism is self-deception. And by that he means, quote, pretending to ourselves that we don't know what we really do. It means playing at being ignorant, though we are really in the know. So, maybe they just don't like the idea at all, and we don't know why. For whatever reason, maybe I can add 8, 9, 10, 11, 12 reasons. And for those of you who are listening right now, I'll end where I started. Yes, Christians also believe in Christianity for other reasons that I don't think are the best reasons. They'll say I'm a Christian because that's where I was raised. Just the other day, I was listening to a news clip by Joel Osteen, and someone asked him about other religions, and he said, I just did this just the one my parents taught me. Just the one my parents taught me. And I just want to beat my head on the desk and say, Joel, please don't say that. It just so fits into what the non-religious people of the day believe in the Western world, which is religion's just a preference. It's not knowledge. It's just a preference. Like you like chocolate ice cream, you believe in God, whatever. It's just my parents taught me. I think that's a very, very inadequate, poor reason to believe in the true claims of Christianity. The world-shattering, profound, historical changing true claims of Christianity is not because my parents taught me. It's because it's true. Well, David, why are you a Christian? Because Christianity is true. I like to believe in things that are true. That's why. Not because I'm white. Not because I'm a male. Not because I'm American. Not because my parents were Christians. Not because I grew up in church, but almost left the faith twice. Because I think it's true. But in any case, if you're a skeptic or an atheist, this podcast, if you made it this far, probably makes you quite frustrated because you're convinced that it's just because you find it compelling. And if you are a skeptic or atheist, who is an atheist or skeptic, just because you don't find the evidence compelling, to that I say, I respect your view. I respect your view. I do. Because I think that's a good reason not to believe in something you don't find it compelling. Of course, I think you're wrong, but I respect that view. But if all these other reasons are true, these other emotional and psychological reasons, I think they matter. I would just encourage you to reconsider in such a way that you ponder what you feel about it as well and see if your feelings are getting in the way as well. And I do the same thing with Christians when I say, consider the evidence as objectively as you can, but knowing that your emotions play a part. If you're a Christian listening to this, I encourage you when you talk to a person who's non-religious to remember, it's not about the argument. Arguments can clear the way for belief. That is true. Believe me, they can clear the way for belief. But you can win the argument and lose the person. And that's a big deal. So that reminds me of something a guy on Twitter the other day said. He appreciated something I said. He thought I committed some kind of fallacy, which I disagree with him. But he said, it was good. I look forward to debate. And my first thought was, I don't. I'm not a debater. What I mean is, that's not my goal in life. If you want to chat about Christianity, I'd love to chat about it. But I could win every single argument and lose the person. And the other atheist, he could have won every argument I gave at him, and I'm still convinced Christianity is true because of my experience of God. So the argument's all alone. All that to say, emotions matter. Let's keep those in mind. And Christians, let's be as stinking kind and awesome and gentle and wonderful as we can be, so that none of these excuses will fit for you. At minimum, they need to leave your presence thinking, you know what? That was at least one Christian who was nice. They weren't hypocritical. They weren't a punk. At least one Christian. And let it be you today. God bless you. Until next time. Thank you so much for listening to A Glimpse of the Kingdom. To listen to other podcasts, go to iTunes and search up A Glimpse of the Kingdom. A Glimpse of the Kingdom. There you can subscribe to all the podcasts. They'll be automatically updated to whatever program you use, or of course through iTunes. Or you can go through my website, davidpendergrass.com. If you want more information about the marriage retreats that I lead, or more information about the consulting that I do, go to davidpendergrassconsulting.com. If you'd like to contact me directly, find me on Twitter at Dr. D. Pendergrass, at Dr. D. Pendergrass, and I will do my best to respond to your Twitter comment or question, and maybe even address your issue on the air on my podcast. I'll see you online.